This is lesson 7 in Introductory Greek. Tonight we will be looking at 2 more verb tenses. This will give us 4 verb tenses that we will know. We already know the present active indicative and we know the future active indicative. We're going to add 2 more active indicatives, and that's going to be the imperfect and the aorist. Aorist is actually, we have first and second aorist, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. These 2 tenses, imperfect and aorist, are grouped together because they share some similarities in how they are formed, as well as the kind of action that they represent. Imperfect and aorist both are the Greek version of past tense. They express some sort of action in the past. Imperfect and the aorist will be formed similarly, but yet there are, of course, some differences. So what we're working with is past tense. We've learned present and we have learned future. Now we're going to learn the historical past. I want us to look at how these the endings. We see our chart. Eluon, Eloes, Eloin, Eloamen, Eloete, Eloan. You'll notice my stem is lu, and then something has happened to that. Aorist, I have elusa, elusas, elumen, elusin, elusamen, elusate, elusan. Now, how are these formed? Each of these are formed with an augment. So we're augmenting the term. We're putting a vowel at the front of our verb, and the augment is an epsilon in both cases. This is how we recognize our past tense. We have the epsilon augment. Not only do I have an epsilon augment, but I also have a connecting vowel in the imperfect. You'll see my omicron or my epsilon in here. So I have my augment plus my imperfect morpheme, the connecting vowel, which is the omicron or the epsilon. And then I add my secondary suffixes. So I have noon, I have noon, sigma, noon. Notice my omicron and my epsilon. My omicron is changed to epsilon in third person singular to differentiate it from the first person singular. Notice I have amen, ete, on. Notice my first person singular and my first person or my third person plural have the same augment and the same ending. How do you tell them? How do you tell the difference? How do you think you'll tell the difference? That's right, context. My context will tell me whether it's third person singular or whether it's third person plural or first person singular. So we add an augment, we use the connecting vowel with the secondary suffixes. Now if I come to the aorist is going to operate very similarly. I'm going to augment, so I put my epsilon at the beginning. I will add the aorist morpheme. Okay? Remember in the future tense, future and present, both of those, present active, future active, both of those share the same endings. Luo, luso. Okay? They share the same present active endings. However, how do I know a future tense? I have the sigma connecting vowel. In the aorist, I have a sigma alpha connector. So this is my aorist morpheme. Remember, morpheme is just how am I morphing the word? How am I changing the word? I add my epsilon augment, I add my sigma alpha morpheme, and then the secondary suffixes. Now, these secondary suffixes are similar to the imperfect as well. They're similar. What is different is I have my epsilon augment is the same. My sigma connector is different. And my stem is going to be different. You don't see it here because this is first aorist. But in second aorist, for example, let me go down here. In second aorist, I will have the augment, but the augment will be added to the aorist stem. Right now, this is the present tense stem. So I'm adding an augment to the present tense stem. In the second aorist, I'm adding my augment to the aorist stem. And then I add the imperfect suffixes. So, the second aorist is going to be a combination of these two, like a hybrid, if you will. A second aorist is going to take the aorist stem and it's going to put the imperfect endings on it. First aorist, which is what we have here, takes the present stem and adds aorist connecting morpheme and then the secondary suffixes. Secondary meaning these are going to be past tense. Okay? Now, how do I translate this? So, eluon, elos, eluin, eluamen, eloete, eluon is I was loosening, you were loosing, he was loosing. So I have my my were, my was, my be verb here. Okay? We were loosing, you were loosing, they were loosing. Come over to aorist, and the aorist will be translated I loosed, you loosed, he, she, it loosed. We loosed, you loosed, they loosed. Okay? Now, the imperfect and the aorist both signify past tense. But what kind of past tense? Both of these, this dot represents an action that occurred. Something happened. But what happened after it happened? Did it continue happening? Did it stop happening? There's different types of aorists, and there's different types of imperfects. Let me show you 4 of them. Up here in the corner, if you can read this. You have the continuous imperfect, and we can illustrate it this way. It's an event that happened in the past, and it continues to happen, it's just not completed. That's why it's called imperfect. The perfect will express something that happened, it had a beginning, but then it was completed. For example, when Jesus is on the cross, he says, tetelestai. That is a perfect tense verb, and what it means was, he began the work, and now he has finished the work. Strong. It's there in the crucifixion that the perfect tense, it adds a lot of weight to some theological doctrines of soteriology. So you can have continuous imperfect. It began in the past and it continues to act. Habitual. I used to loose. So a habitual imperfect means that there is this, it began in the past and it was something that I continued to do and I kept doing it. Attempted means it was something that was tried in the past. I tried to loose, but it wasn't successful. It didn't occur. You have initiation, imperfect. I began to loose. I bring these up to help us understand that even though the Greek does more than just simply express past tense, there are nuances to the past tense that context will help us out, as well as me taking these and saying, do these fit the context of how this verb is being used? Okay? Now, let me talk just a moment about the augment that we're adding here, because sometimes there can be some unique things taking place. First of all, when you add an augment to a word that begins with a consonant, that's called a syllabic augment. A syllabic augment. And a syllabic augment means I'm adding a syllable to it. Sometimes we will add an augment to a word that has a short vowel, like an alpha. And what will happen is that alpha and that augment will morph into an eta. And so I lose the alpha, I lose the epsilon, and I have an eta. And so sometimes this is called a process morpheme. The alpha is in process to the eta. So you may not see the epsilon because it has been absorbed into the alpha and now they've created an eta. Well, sometimes you have an augment added to a verb that either begins with a long vowel or a diphthong. And in that case, you have what is called a zero morpheme, meaning the epsilon is not even there. And the only way I will recognize that it's aorist or imperfect is by looking at the endings. So these are ways that the augment can be used. Okay, so that's lesson 7. What I'd like for you to do is at the end of the lesson, we've got 2 things. We've got vocabulary. There's a list of imperfect and aorist verbs, some new, some old. Commit those to memory. There are also exercises at the end of lesson 7. What I'd like for you to do are numbers 1 through 5 and 18 and 19. And we'll come back together next time and we will work through some of those. Okay? Thank you.